take a roll call, please.
Blake,
Here.
Carberry Montgomery,
Here.
Kroll,
Here.
Obrecht, excuse me.
Well, sure if he's here or not.
Yep, I'm here.
Okay. Thanks, Adam. All right. Well, thank you today. We are, except for Representative Forbes, who's in the chambers, but thanks everybody for taking time to do this. We really do appreciate this, and thank you to our legislators for taking the time to speak with us on some issues and for representing us in the legislature. So. With that, again, I said Senator Zahn is not here. I don't know, is Senator Whitfer, is he on? Senator Whitfer, are you on the phone? Don't hear him. I see Representative Gilbach who's here, and also Representative Andrews and Representative Forbes. So thank you, gentlemen, for all being here with us today. We'll get started. I don't know if we do have a few points that maybe we want to bring up, but I thought maybe we just start with an open forum from our legislators, and I'll just go. Well, I'm always going in alphabetical order. So, Representative Andrews, do you want to start us off and just give a few comments about what you see coming up for the legislature from a city standpoint?
So, thank you guys, first of all, for letting us participate in this work day, or whatever it's called, session. It's, I think this is the first time I've been invited to this one, so look forward to hearing from your questions. I guess what we heard probably on the doors most outside of schools is some sort of taxes. Property taxes were number one. And of course, you know, that's an open door because it's like a Pandora's box, you know, it's like whack-a-mole, you know, it's a joint effort, and it's not something that is handled at the state level typically. And so, so they expect us to work with you guys and get something to address that. Did hear a little bit about DART, and I think those are things that are important to your community, and always hear about workforce shortages. And so I think the things that you had pointed out are things that have come up quite a bit. So look forward to hearing your questions.
All right. Representative Forbes, John, you want to start us off with a few comments?
Yeah. Well, thanks for having us here today. Just a little background. The legislature, I served on the Appropriations Committee for the last 4 years, and the REC, Revenue Estimating Committees, came out with their numbers last week, I believe, and they weren't as good as a lot of people had expected them to be on the anticipation of revenue coming into the state of Iowa. I think the economy in Iowa is relatively good. I mean, we're not seeing any really drop off in revenue, but I think that the biggest impact is going to be on the tax cut that was put in place last session, and the impact it's going to have on the budgeting process moving forward for the next, 5, 6, 7 years. And that's my biggest concern. You look at when this is fully implemented, we're going to have about a 20% reduction, over 20% reduction in revenue coming into our state. And that's when we're going to have some very tough decisions to make at the state capitol on if we don't have the increased revenue and growth in businesses and industry. We're going to have an issue where we're going to do the cuts when it comes to whether it's education, our state Medicaid program, and other public safety services and things like that. So that's one of my big concerns right now is making sure that we provide the adequate services to people in the state of Iowa. And with the tax cuts that are in place, which I did not vote for, of course, that's what sometimes keeps me up at night. And I know it's not going to be bad this year, maybe next year, but we get into 25, 26. I think that's when it's going to have an impact. And that's where I think cities may feel the pain of that too, because the funding that we're looking at is not going to be there to be able to, provide money for cities and counties. So as for DART, I know DART's in an issue where they're having some serious financial difficulties, and I've worked with the department on DHS on trying to get more funding for DART through our Iowa Medicaid program, and over the years they've really cut back on that through the managed care organizations, and so we need to work with MCOs to make sure that public transportation is reimbursed properly for the services they provide to Medicaid patients here in the state of Iowa. There's some talk about, looking at hotel motel tax to supplement the DART here in Polk County. So that'll be talked about. And then when it comes to property taxes, again, there's some talk that there may be some movement on trying to lower property taxes for people in the state of Iowa. But when you do that, it has a very positive or negative effect on cities and counties. And so we have to be very careful when we look at property tax reductions that we aren't putting our cities and counties at risk and having them to either raise their taxes or levy rates and or reduce services to citizens here in city of Urbandale and across the state of Iowa. So that's all I want to say right now, and we'll have more discussion, I'm sure, on all these topics.
All right. Thank you, John. Representative Gelbach. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you for having me here. This is obviously my first one of these. I'm a newly elected legislator, so I don't know what I don't know yet. I'm looking forward to getting to work here in a couple of weeks. Obviously, what Representative Andrews said, at the doors we hear a lot about property tax relief, and that's obviously something that cities and along with the counties and schools have a lot to do with. And I know there's some talk at the legislature about tackling that this year. I haven't seen any specific bills to comment on yet, so I'll do that for a later date. But it's something we did hear a lot about at the doors. I know there's talk of, and your question was on the local option tax, and I know there's some potential to get the I will 3/8 of a cent through. It's been voted on, 10, 20 years. It's been around a long time, constitutionally put in there, and there's some talk about just getting that triggered at some point, and that'll be something to look at, but I haven't seen some specific on that yet either. But I'll be on the local government committee, so looking forward to learning from you. If you have any concerns for Urbandale, I'd love to hear your feedback on any proposed legislation, anything that comes through the local government committee. So thanks again.
All right, thank you. And I understand Senator Whitford is on through the telephone, but was not able to unmute his line originally. So, but I think he has that solved now. So, Senator Whitford, do you want to say a few words now?
Yeah, thank you. And am I unmuted now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I was on from the beginning, so I was able to hear all the conversations. So I appreciate that, and thanks for the opportunity to be here and chat with you guys about this upcoming session. I think the representatives kind of hit on some of the highlights. Property tax is going to be an issue that we'll continue to work on. Other issues that kind of flew under the radar a little bit that would affect some of our cities. 411 changes and adding some extra benefits to that was an issue that passed through the House, not passed through the Senate last year. Right-of-way issues, those types of things, I expect to come back as well. Can dive into property taxes and loss if you guys have specific questions on that. But I do want to just strongly disagree with what Representative Forbes said about the tax bill and the revenues. The REC just met this last week, which is our Revenue Estimating Commission. They're the group that gets together throughout the year, and they tell us what to expect for revenue to come in for the next year and a half or so. I don't know why Representative Forbes was concerned about that, because it actually went up for the second straight time since we left session. So when we left session back in March of 2022, this last March, we were expecting a certain number, and the only thing that's happened in the last 6 months is that's went up $300 million. So while we're not seeing tremendous revenue growth overall, that's because that's what tax cuts are. They take some money off of the table. But even with that, this year's growth alone has almost paid for the first year of the tax cut. So very confident in the tax bill that we have passed. We've done it in a very thoughtful manner. And mostly we were able to do that because we have been able to control spending at the state level and make investments where investments are needed, hold down spending in areas that we want to hold down spending, but really have created an ongoing surplus of almost $1 billion every year ongoing. So that's why we're trying to get some of that money back to the taxpayers so that they can use it with their family, invest in their business, do whatever they want with it. But the REC was not a scary moment at all. Revenues actually were projected up after they were projected up back in October. So I'm very, very pleased with that and happy with the progress on the day. So with that, happy to join the conversation on other issues.
All right, thank you, Senator. I think I'll just open it up to council members right now. If there's any, we gave some points. You've addressed some of the points that we provided to you, but council members, does anybody have a question you want to start off with? Amy, are you starting?
Trying to find our list.
Well, let me just start with property tax. I'll just kind of start that off from the city's perspective. You all mentioned property taxes. Obviously, that is from the way that it's structured in Iowa. That's a major part of how we fund our operations. It depends obviously on jurisdictions, but most of the time it's about the property owners, 25% of the property owners' total property tax bill. So we contribute to about 25%, 25 to 30%, depending on school districts and everything else. So, but it can be, it has changed a little bit since local option sales and service tax has been implemented, but it still accounts for about 75% of our total revenues where we operate our budgets. And so with that in mind, what can cities be looking at as far as changes in the property tax system, and how can we positively impact that those changes that might be coming, and how do you see any changes coming through the legislature that would not have negative impacts on city operations? Start that off.
This is Jack Whitcher. I guess I can start. Obviously, all three of the Republicans or four of the Republicans brought it up as an issue, so it's something the House and the Senate are definitely talking about, ready to work on. I would say at this point, there's no magic bill or idea that is ready and prepared for day one of session. I think it will be a continuous conversation throughout the session on what those changes might look like. And so don't have a lot of details of what that would be. I think the biggest frustration I think people have with property taxes is, besides just the sheer amount of it, we're one of the top property tax states in the entire country. But beyond just the sheer number, one of the biggest concerns people have and the fear that people have is with their assessment. As we know, assessments on everybody's property in central Iowa and probably statewide have taken a dramatic increase. So I think Randy Ripperger said probably about 20% increase in property values here in Polk County. That makes people nervous. And we know there's a whole complicated formula and the rollbacks and all that, but people get very nervous when they hear their house went up 20% in value. And that's generally a great thing if your house is 20% more valuable than it was last year. But if you're not going to sell that house, you don't have the money to just continue to eat a tax increase every year. Yet we have the new assessments come through, and so there's a bunch of new money that is found for the locals, and you obviously can adjust your levy rate up or down. But I think the frustration that people hear, that we've heard over the last few years, is the press release from City X or City Y saying, "Great news, everybody, your levy's staying the same." Well, that sounds good in a press release until you get your tax bill, and your tax bill's higher because your assessment went up 20%. And people are like, well, what the heck's going on with this? So there's confusion with it. So adding transparency, adding some spending limitations or something like that might be part of it. But I think, and we've made progress on property tax. Here in Polk County, the mental health change that we did last year, 2 years ago, I think, to pick up mental health funding at the state level as opposed to a county by county network of state of funding for mental health. We were the last state in the country that funded mental health with counties. And so we took that off. The state picked it up. We pay for that fully now. And that equaled about a 38 or so cent decrease to property tax levies across the state. But the catch there is the counties actually had to pass it on. And there are counties out there, and this wasn't even a partisan thing. It wasn't like the Republican Party counties passed it on, the Democrat ones didn't. It was all over the board. Some counties passed on that entire amount, and some just kept it all and didn't pass on that savings at all. They kept the 38-cent increase. And like I said, there's Republican-led counties that did it. There's Democrat-led counties that actually cut it. Here in Polk County, we were able to cut the county levy by, I think, about 34%. And so these things have real impact. And I think statewide, the mental health change and the change we've done with property tax led to one of the lowest statewide property tax increases in the last 20 years. I think it was 0.4% statewide. So these things have real impact, but we're trying to address the concerns that we hear at the door and want to continue to work on that.
Yeah, follow up on that real quick, Bob.
Go ahead, Adam.
To Senator Whitfer, I guess I've heard that one of the avenues of adjusting this is to mess with the assessments versus messing with the formula behind the assessment.
Yeah.
I guess kind of not a betting man, but are you kind of seeing the process being more messing with the formula behind the assessment and letting the assessment stay put, or start even at the assessment level?
Yeah, I have heard that as well, that people want to change with the assessment, and I will say this, that as I've matured in the legislature or been there longer, initially you're like, well, the assessments are the problem, and I used to rail about that my first couple of years. What you learn as you serve longer is the assessors are just doing their job. They're following state law, and they're valuing the property at market value like they're supposed to. And if they don't, there's a process to adjust that to make it more market value. So I know there's conversation about changing the assessment and the way we do assessments. I'm not sold on that yet because I don't think it solves anything. It might make people feel good, and it might be a bill that people can go talk about. I don't think it really lowers property taxes, and I think it probably makes it more complicated. And so I think on the Senate side, at least, we're going to start the conversation with the formula and not so much focus on the assessment.
Okay.
I'll just
address that.
say, Bob, it's all based on the levy that the city set is where we see the adjustments in what people pay for their property taxes. So, and I know, of course, been on the city council for a few years. I know that's something that we spend a lot of time on and probably still do right now, is making sure that we have a levy that, provides the services for the citizens of our city, but we're not sitting on a big pile of money either, and so it's all based on the levy rate. You could raise your property taxes 100%, or the property values, I mean, and it's all based on what the levy rate is. And so I think properties go up all the time. I think right now we're in an inflationary period of around 5, 6, 7%. So cities, you know, they're going to have to be able to cover those costs. And so I think that's where you're going to see probably in the next year, you know, the levy rates, you know, may creep back up a little to cover increased costs that cities are bearing right now. So we'll see what happens. You know, like Senator Whitford said, we did reduce property taxes with the taking the levy off for mental health a year or two ago. And I know the intention of the legislature was that, you know, that money would go back to lower the levy rates for people in the state of Iowa, and some did it and some did not do it. And so we have to be very aware of that if we do any work on property tax, that it doesn't have a negative impact on taxpayers here in the state of Iowa.
Thank
Can I add one more thing? This is Jack Whitford again.
Go ahead,
Can I add
Senator.
one more thing?
Sure.
To build on something Representative Forbes just said, with the extreme inflationary period of housing values, the other thing that I'm concerned about, and I don't necessarily have any answers other than kind of raising the point, and we'll continue to talk to people about it and raise the point at the Capitol, is when these assessments were being set, when they were traveling the county setting these assessments, housing values had spiked big time. Well, we're starting to see those cool off and calm down, especially with 7% interest rates. The price of a lot of houses is starting, and I'm talking resale more than new construction, but the resale of a lot of houses is starting to come back down. And so you're going to have a lot of situations where, you know, somebody's house in summer of 2022 or spring of summer 2022 may have sold for $500,000 when interest rates were still 3%. Well, today they couldn't get $425 for it or $400 for it. And so they come up really quick with the assessments. How quick do they come down and get back to accurate? Because I do think there was a spike, especially in the resale of these homes that are now going to be overassessed probably compared to what they could somebody could sell their house for today. So again, I don't have a solution on that, but I think it's something that we need to be aware of.
Thank you, Senator. I do see that Senator Zahn was able to join us now. So, Brad, I'll open the floor to you if you want to give some comments. And thank you for being here.
Well, I'm late. I apologize. Something came up at work that I had to take care of now. I don't know exactly what's been said. I'm just, you know, first of all, obviously you're talking about property taxes. I haven't seen a bill. I don't know what's in the bill. And I just do know this, that, you know, when this last fall, and basically every time we're door knocking, we get a lot of people asking us about property taxes and why are they so high. And so I'm anxious to hear what they're doing. Obviously, I was mayor of Urbandale at one time, so I see it from that perspective as well. But you know, I'm just going to wait and see what he comes up with.
All right. Thank you, Senator. Is there anything else you want to address, Brad, while you have the floor? Or not?
No, there really is. I'm just here to listen.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks. Is there anyone from the council that would like to ask a question at this point?
Well, I'll jump in. This is Bridget Carberry Montgomery. I'll jump in with a more specific question about DART. I have been the DART, Urbandale's DART commissioner since 2020. I also currently serve on the DART executive committee. And as our legislators know, we are trying to find new sources of revenue so that we can take some of the burden off of our property taxpayers in Polk and Dallas County. So just a little background, and then I'll ask a question here. So reducing property taxes is a focus for the DART Board of Commissioners. DART is a critically important regional service that many Central Iowans rely on. In particular, it is the only way many low-income and disabled individuals are able to get to work, which we know is the number one reason people ride DART, which is to get to work. If we want to lower property taxes, we can't continue solely to rely on property taxes as the local source of revenue for public transit. During the 2021 legislative session, a local option hotel motel tax passed the Senate. This proposal would have reduced Urbandale's transit levy from 64 cents per thousand to 26 cents per thousand, reducing the total annual amount of property taxes collected for transit in Urbandale by nearly $1.4 million. And also, so that works out to 39.5 cents reduction in Urbandale, 32 cents in Johnston, and 31.6 cents in Grimes, which are other communities that you all represent. That, as you know, especially those of you that have served on local government before, that is a significant amount of property tax reduction that is permanent. It will go away. It is not 5 or 10 cent reduction this year that may be threatened next year by outside forces. So my question is, do you anticipate the legislature will support diversifying revenue for public transit? And is there any specific solution that you think should be considered? And I also wanted to thank our Senator Zahn for serving on the interim DART study commission, for lack of a better term, that met over the course of the last couple of months to try and come to some answers on this. So this is a real chance for counties or cities in Polk and Dallas County, as well as statewide, for those that want to implement this local option, hotel motel tax, to really have significant property tax relief for our citizens. So I'd like you all to comment and give this some serious consideration.
Bridget, who'd like to start on that question?
Well, I'll if I get to pick, I'll take Senator Zahn as someone who is probably a little more familiar with this right now, having served on the committee that the governor appointed to work this summer and fall.
Well, I did learn a lot. I certainly recognize how important mass transportation is for the groups that you identified. I don't know. You're asking me to make a prediction. I don't know what it is. I know that the proposal is going to be studied very thoroughly by myself and my colleagues. Right now, it seems that I'm hearing from the people that are in the hospitality industry that have some concerns about raising the tax, and what effect that would have on the hospitality industry in the state of Iowa. I was on the Greater Des Moines Visitors and Board with Greg Edwards, and certainly it is something that, whenever we do anything down there, we always hear from both sides, but recognizing that a lot of that COVID money is going to go away, which really helped a lot of, in particular, DART. Obviously, I certainly see the challenge coming forward, but I don't know, and I have not had a chance to talk to any of my colleagues in regards to if they have any interest in the proposal that committee put forward.
Well, I appreciate your comments, Senator Zahn. I'm concerned that you're not the only person that has indicated they keep hearing from the hospitality community, and I guess what more can our local governments do so that you say, I'm also hearing from local governments about the importance of lowering property taxes, which I think is something that, based on everything we've discussed today, is what you want to do.
Well, my prediction is going to be, we're going to look at everything. It would obviously be part of the any kind of property tax reform or anything like that. I don't know. I just can't predict. Obviously, there's been some proposals that have been forward that in the past that have not. I'm getting in late in this call, so I don't know exactly what was said, but I know there was some concerns about the last property tax bill, at least the proposal that was out there. So I believe it'll be part of the big picture is what it'll be. That conversation will be part of the big picture.
Thank you.
And I would just chime in, Jack Whitaker again. I would just chime in and to build upon Brad and say that any solutions there are going to have to fit within the framework of reducing an overall tax burden on Iowans. We don't have a legislature right now that's real excited about going and raising taxes anywhere, especially in this inflationary period. And so The framework's going to have to be similar to what you said as far as eliminating a levy somewhere, drastically reducing it, instead of, oh, we're all going to max out our 99 cents or whatever it was, and then we want more to build on top of that. I don't see the votes being there to implement a statewide local hotel motel tax, even if it's optional, to solve a problem that only really exists in Des Moines and maybe Cedar Rapids or a couple other metros. And so,
well, it's not actually just
like
Des Moines, it's all of the participants in DART, which would be Grimes, Ankeny, Urbandale, West Des Moines, Bondurant.
I mean, Polk County.
And Dallas County. So I guess I don't understand how a local option tax that voters actually get to vote on is less desirable than an actual 30 to 40% permanent 30 to 40 cent permanent reduction in our property tax levy. That's what I don't understand.
I didn't say it was less desirable, but I think the concerns that that I shared about the mental health bill, and some of the people passed along, some of them didn't. And then, you know, I'm not as familiar with this as Brad or you or people that were on the commission, but you're asking someone in Florinda to implement a new potential local option sales tax or a hotel motel tax to offset something that doesn't exist down there. And so now you're just giving those areas a brand new tax to use if they want, and they don't see the relief. And
well, Florinda wouldn't need to reduce or to implement a local option sales tax to support transit.
So does your bill like prevent it? It can only be done in Polk County and Dallas, or is it?
No, because other communities should have the ability, if they need it, to, transit systems in Iowa City, Cedar Rapids, Dubuque, Fort Dodge, you name it, they should have the opportunity. But Des Moines is
the hotel motel limited to the counties that have a transit system, or is it any county in the state?
I believe it's only limited to those that have a transit system, but rural transit agencies would probably be able to tap into it. But there's not a whole lot of hotels in, rural Cass County. I just feel very strongly, if that's not clear, about this issue. And, we want to reduce property tax as much as our legislature. And this seems like a very clear-cut way to help us diversify revenue, keep DART moving forward, and bring significant property tax reduction to the DART member communities.
One thing I'd like to add is, in my opening comments, was also the reimbursement for transportation services for our state Medicaid patients. And I know you've had discussions with DART on this for the last 3 or 4 or 5 years. Is the reimbursement, it doesn't even come close to covering the cost for transportation for these patients. And so I think we should be looking at our state Medicaid program, working with the managed care organizations again to make sure that transit costs are covered at a fair rate. And that would require, more money input from the state of Iowa. And I think right here in Polk County, and maybe Bridget, you can tell me this, but they come up short. I think it's over $1 million a year, if I recall. It might be more than that. But I think we need to definitely.
Absolutely. John, that's another structural deficit that is impacting DART. We're not getting reimbursed since we went to MCOs at the rate that we were prior, and we're still providing the rides at the same cost to DART, but we're only getting reimbursed at a few dollars per ride. And so DART and its member communities are having to subsidize our for-profit MCOs to get people to their appointments. So, and I believe that this can be fixed administratively through HHS, but so far we haven't had any luck. So both of those things are significant factors in the situation that we are dealing with in DART. The money from the MCOs would be go a long way, along with the local option hotel motel tax.
Let me thanks everybody for the comments. And Representative Andrews, did you want to say something since you were maybe stepping forward to speak there? Do you want to comment on that right now? Or?
Well, only I really just echo what has already been said by senators. There's Brian Best, representative, was also on that council, and I've reached out to him. And I don't really have much to add, but I am seeking out some information from him as well. And I think what it boils down to is, what are the numbers? I mean, it's kind of hard to commit to an approach until you actually see everything and in front of you and actually look at the numbers. But, listening to everything, I think, is the key.
Related to all of this, again, there's also been some discussion on a statewide sales tax increase that would then alter the current structure of local option sales and service tax. Is that still being discussed? And so, can you give us some idea of what we might expect on that part?
Yeah, again, Jack Whitford. So the origin of this whole conversation goes back probably 3 or 4 years ago when the governor released her Invest in Iowa proposal, kind of tax changes. And as part of that bill, she did some stuff to change mental health funding. She also had implementing the I-Will program, the 3/8 of a cent. At the time, there wasn't a strong legislative will to raise the sales tax a penny to implement that 3/8 of a cent. We weren't gonna raise the sales tax another penny. And so, in looking for creative solutions to how you could still fund the I-Will Trust and not raise taxes, an idea popped up about loss and bringing that statewide. And it's not really a new concept. It kind of mirrors the old silo save tax from the school system, where it used to be a local option voted on school by school, and it got to the point where basically everybody had it. And so at some point before I was in the legislature, I think it was under a Democrat trifecta, so it's not like Republicans doing this and Democrats doing that. They decided to bring it statewide, so it's the statewide save tax now, or save penny now. And so we're looking at, okay, how do you fund this I-Will Trust without raising taxes? And one of the ideas or options was to bring the lost penny, now that almost everybody has implemented it. Des Moines and the contiguous communities were some of the last ones to do it. Maybe there's 20 or so cities out there that haven't done it yet. But now that almost everyone has done it, can you bring that statewide and use the same model that they used from silo to save, and bring that statewide, and then getting the money back to the locals? And I think the intent would be the same proportion amount of money. Well, why would you do that? Well, then you trigger I-Will, and there is a delta there of maybe $200 million or something that we would have to fund, which we could fund that from the general fund. And so because money's somewhat tangible, you could bring that statewide, it triggers the I-Will money's protected, and the intent would be to kind of keep it whole. So that's kind of the origin of this, and why that was even discussed was to try to solve the riddle when the governor wanted to implement I-Will. Okay, so fast forward, that conversation has really calmed down as far as implementing I-Will. I know Senator Dawson, our Ways and Means Chairman, continues to work on that issue. I don't know where that's at in the process. I wouldn't call it a priority by any means. But if I-Will is going to be implemented, that is the path forward. It's more of my statement that if the constituencies that want I-Will get the support and say we need to get this done, that's the path forward. And I'm not saying that I'm saying we got to get I-Will done this year. Just saying if that comes to a head, that would be the only path forward at this point to get I-Will funded. I'm happy to answer questions about that because I know it's kind of complicated, but happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Senator. Let me just, I know we've had a lot of discussion here, and I know we're short on time here as well, so we do need to address another issue here as well. But, I just want to sum up, I think, on property taxes from city, at least from Urbandale standpoint, and from, I think, a lot of cities is that, again, as I said from the beginning, property taxes is a major source of how we operate and how we fund our operations. As the city council, we certainly take that responsibility very seriously as far as what level of services we provide to our residents and doing it at a very competitive cost. That's what my charge has been since I've been on city council and now as mayor. And I think my city council takes that very seriously as well. So from our perspective, please keep that in mind. That's all we ask. We know that that there can be a lot of discussion, and we know that people don't like new taxes or higher taxes. I get that. I don't want to pay higher taxes either. But by the same token, do please keep in mind that this city and a lot of the cities that I know take our responsibility as local elected officials very seriously in trying to provide the services that our residents need and expect at the absolute best cost. And that's all we're trying to do as well. So, and whatever changes to the system may come through legislative action, please know that they have a real effect on cities and other local governments as well. So, I'm just going to leave it there. Just, as you move forward in your discussions, please, certainly we will be paying attention. And if you have questions about how we do things or how this is going to have an effect on Urbandale, please reach out to us, and we'd be happy to sit down and talk about it as well, too. With that, I think, Adam, you had a question that you wanted to also ask as well.
Yeah, so I'd say one of the loudest set of questions that we got as a council this past year dealt with natural resources, specifically with coyotes and deer, and the city's ability to manage the coyote population, the deer population, things that way. I know the rules more land on the DNR side, but how can cities gain control a little bit back of being able to manage the population of wildlife in their communities is the question. And I didn't know if anybody served on the Natural Resources Committee or not, but I won't say it's the most important issue we faced this year, but it was definitely one of the loudest issues we faced from our residents this year.
Yeah, I guess I'll take a stab at that. Oh, go ahead. Brad, you want to go for it?
Well, I mean, one thing is I hear from the neighbors. I think we know the neighborhood right off of Merle Hay and the interstate, where a little poodle was destroyed, and I tried to hook up. Well, I basically copied the mayor, and I don't recall who the person was that was really, really very concerned about it. Tried to get DNR. There's no doubt about it. Something needs to be done. And, I thought the DNR would have some kind of part of their agency which would be able to go out there and trap those coyotes and get them out of that area. I'm going to be following up with that. Personally, I wouldn't care, how they get those coyotes out of there. Obviously, you're in a city, so you can't shoot them, but it is a problem, and we're seeing that with a lot of other, obviously. It's in Des Moines with a mountain lion, and I mean, the environment seems like it's changed over the years. But I'm going to be following up with Annette Sweeney is the incoming chair of the Natural Resources, and I'm going to be having a conversation with her, and maybe it's something that we need to look at, because this is not just happening in Urbandale or the Des Moines metropolitan area. It's happening in a lot of metropolitan areas as well.
Yeah, this is Jack Whitford. I guess just from a 10,000 foot view, the legislature, kind of the mindset or kind of where we've been the last couple of years is we're more than happy to engage on some of these issues. In fact, last year we passed a bill. The Senate's passed it 2 or 3 times, but last year got it through all the way and signed by the governor to try to control some of the deer population, not necessarily in cities, but statewide, just with the number of cars that are hitting deer and the property damage. Obviously don't want to put in jeopardy our kind of world-renowned hunting and, you know, what comes with that, because that is a real industry in Iowa. Don't want to put that in jeopardy, but we want to balance that between, do we really need, 15, doe on the side of the road as we're driving from here to Pella, which is what our natural resource chair last year would tell us. And so we've been willing to do that. I think we're going to have a bill this year probably to do a similar thing with raccoons and open up the raccoon hunting period, again, not in the city, but statewide, to a longer period, because raccoons are out and they're eating a lot of the crop out in the countryside. And so they want to control that population. So I guess in general, Adam, I would just say that there's an appetite to do some of these things. Just have to do it in a smart way, obviously, that protects the citizens as well when you're trying to do some of this within the city limits. But definitely open-minded to it.
All right. Thank you. Anybody else want to comment on that? All right. Any further comments or questions?
This is Amy, and my apologies. My dogs are going to go nuts in about 2 seconds. But I am looking at the unemployment rate, the workforce shortage that we have here in the state, and wondering what efforts are being taken at the legislative level to address that.
Yeah, and this is Jack. I guess I can take a stab at that one as well. Put a lot of focus on it over the last couple of years, and some of it's just the market. When the economy was booming and people's retirements were high, they were able to retire early, or one of the spouses could stay home and make market decisions based on that. Some of those people are now starting to have to come back to work, unfortunately. But we've also worked on a lot of things like apprenticeships, whether that started with just smaller programs. This last year, the governor rolled out a pretty innovative idea as far as teacher apprentices, where teachers are starting to work into degrees while still in high school, but starting kids earlier, giving them more information about, and this is one thing that I think is really important, that we passed a bill maybe 5 years ago in the Senate that never really got through and signed by the governor, but really work with parents and students when they're still in high school, so that when they're making decisions about where to go to college and what majors to have, that they're picking majors and degrees that result in jobs right now and good paying jobs. And we had a bill in the Senate years ago that would have outlined, the Regent universities would have to outline, okay, what are our degree programs, what's the average debt when you're done, what's the average salary when you're done, so that parents and students can sit down and make a very well-informed decision on what is likely the biggest financial decision those people have made up until that point, where to go to college and where to take $100,000 of loan or more. And so it's that. We reduced some of the unemployment rules to try to encourage people back to work at 16 weeks instead of 26 weeks. So there's not one magic bullet on the workforce. It's a combination of all those things, but definitely recognize that it's an issue and want to continue to do anything we can to encourage those that are able and willing in the workforce to come back into the workforce. And some of that is putting work requirements on some of our welfare programs. If you're an able-bodied person that can work, that just chooses not to, and you're on our welfare programs, well, we need to get you in the workforce. So we have worked on that in the Senate the last few years as well. And so, again, there's not a silver bullet, but it's really coming at it from a lot of different angles, trying to get more people into the workforce. And then, obviously, trying to get people to move here. And that's what taxes are about, and putting a good business climate in place where businesses want to come here and people want to come here. And people we've seen over the pandemic, now that they can work at home, they are making decisions on where to live based on tax rates. And you see states like Florida and Texas that have no income tax, their populations are booming. And states that are high income tax, like New Jersey and New York, they're really hurting. And so we want to be addressing it in that way too. So it's really a holistic approach more than any one single bill that you can pass that would affect our improve our workforce.
So when I look at that number, I see 2.6% unemployment rate in Polk County. To me, that's not welfare folks staying home. That is folks who frankly don't have the means or the ability or maybe caretaking for another individual, and the lack of our social system, our social service system, to be able to support and adequately allow individuals to return. I mean, Iowa leads the nation with two-parent working families. What we're running into, we have a child care crisis, literally a crisis in this state. And I don't see how we're going to get people back into the workforce. Again, 2.6% unemployment. If we can't give the basic supports that allow individuals to go into the workforce. So again, it's a bigger, complex issue. I understand that. Taxes drive some of that. How we choose to spend our dollars makes a heck of a lot of difference when it comes to supporting our employers and supporting our individuals to be able to make a living and actually stay in this state. So I think it's just something that you need to think bigger and broader about, and context matters. Thank you.
Amy, I think you hit the nail on the head when you talked about child care, adequate child care here in the state. And that's one of the things I hear is being able for especially women to be able to access quality child care services so they can get back into the workforce. And as you know, child care services are very expensive. And you're spending $1,200, I just heard, a month on average for child care here in Iowa. And so you have, a couple kids. It really doesn't make financial sense for a person to get into the workforce because they can't afford the child care. So I think we need to really address that in the next session to make sure that if we want to get people back to working here in the state of Iowa, we've got to make sure that child care is a #1 priority and being able to look at innovative ways to get that funded and reduce costs for parents here in the state of Iowa.
I would just like to follow up on that. Many of you guys know we did actually get rid of the child care tax credit cliff effect for those who would lose all their funding. That tax credit at $45,000, we doubled that to $90,000. So that gives typically young professionals and a little bit more option. And one of the things we are going to do is work a little more on child care and look at do a lot more listening. But I did want to say that that was a significant thing that we've already done. We're just looking to do more.
Further comments? All right. Thank you very much, senators and representatives. Thank you very much for joining us today. Thank you for listening to us. We appreciate that and answering our questions. And we know you're going to have a busy time here in a few weeks. And we look forward to continuing the conversation as you start your session. And again, as you start to debate issues relative to cities, please just keep us in mind and please reach out. And certainly we do appreciate the fact, as has always been, that you listen to us as well. So thank you for allowing that. I know whenever I reach out, at least I can get a response and present perspective from the city. So thanks for listening to us on those issues of great importance to cities as well. So thanks again. If you'd like to stay on, we're gonna discuss the regional water. If you'd like to stay on, you can certainly can do that. If not, we understand if you want to leave too. But we are going to get an update from our general manager of our water utility about the regional water update. So with that, Dale, I will turn it over to you and to John McHugh.
Thank you.
Muted, Dale. Dale, you're on mute yet.
Thank you. Sorry. Thank you, Mayor Andewig. Just want to quickly introduce our board chair, John McCune. If you could raise your hand there so people can recognize you, John. He's one in the green. There we go. Pat Bode and Mark. Pat Bodie and Mark Wandro are also trustees of the water utility that govern the water utility. As many of you know, we've been working on this for some time. It is a large endeavor. I would like to preface my conversation here a little bit so that you understand that regionalization is still under discussion. We have accomplished much in the past year towards coming to a final document. Des Moines Water Works, West Des Moines Water Works, and Urbandale Water Utility have met routinely throughout the year to accomplish an end result of a 28E, 28F. I will also tell you that there are parts of it that are still under legal review, and so we're trying to move that process forward, but it does take a little time. Regionalization, Central Iowa Water Works is the name of the entity that I believe that will be established under this 28E, 28F. It is a cooperative effort of public water supply systems to establish a regional system of drinking water production and supply facilities under a regional governance to meet existing and future needs for potable water for the metro area as a whole. Central Iowa Water would be responsible for source water development, treatment, and transmission of potable water to its member agencies to meet current and future water demands of the members, develop capital improvement projects to fulfill those obligations, and set rates for wholesale customers to its members. I think it's important for people to understand what it's not. That each member will still operate and govern their own distribution systems, project water needs and demands for their own systems, develop their own capital improvement projects to meet those current and future needs for their own distribution systems, set their own retail rates to meet the financial requirements necessary to operate sufficiently those systems, as well as to continue to provide individual customer service to their customers. I'll not go into who the potential members, but in essence, there are those customers that are currently served by Des Moines Water Works in some fashion. Some take all of their water, others take a portion of their water from Des Moines Water Works. So those are the entities that are being considered for membership. A year ago, we developed the three utilities, board-run utilities, came together and said we needed to develop a micro document which lays out the skeleton, if you will, for regionalization. We established and completed that micro document, sent it to all of the potential members, allowed them to review it, receive their comments back, and over the past year we've been reviewing those comments, implementing legal comment, and try to come up with a finalized documents. So what have we agreed on? We've all agreed that all water produced will be owned by Central Iowa Water. So those waters produced by West Des Moines, produced by Des Moines Water Works, potentially Altoona and Grimes, who also has their own supply. If they choose to join, all the waters will be owned by Central Iowa Water. And all members would be required to buy their water through and from Central Iowa Water. So the second part of that is the ownership. So Central Iowa Water will own the production and supply facilities. All of the water produced by those facilities will be owned by Central Iowa Water. And all members will be required to exclusively contract with Central Iowa Water for their wholesale water supply. The result is a unified rate charge to all members, and in fact, have a part of ownership of the region within that membership. So governance, so how will this be governed? Each member entity would choose a trustee to represent them on that governing board. Those populations that have a population greater than 100,000 would have an additional representative. So at this time, that's simply Des Moines. Des Moines would have 2 representatives on that board. if all 13 entities decided to join, so we'd have 14 on that board representative each entity. There is an option for weighted voting that can be called for topics such as, which is similar to the WRA model, a little different, but topics like rates, capital improvement projects, bylaw changes, long-range plans will be based on consumption, average consumption used by each entity. So to give you an idea, Des Moines currently has and uses about 39 to 40% of the capacity. Urbandale has about 8% of the capacity. So in a weighted vote situation, that's how that would fall. However, I will tell you that there's still discussion on that very issue of the weighted voting, because we want to ensure that no entity or no two entities can control any vote, nor do we want any one entity to have total veto power. So, for instance, if you had a weighted vote, as the WRA has, of 60-some%, in that case, Des Moines could have total veto power. And certainly, it is their opinion, as well as everybody developing this, that we don't want this to be a regional entity, not controlled by one or two entities as a whole. So those are things that we're going to be able to work through, but still under discussion. Operational contracts are being developed. We are very close in finalizing them. The operational contract, so Central Iowa Water would have a contract with Des Moines Water Works, West Des Moines Water Works, to operate those facilities, produce and provide the water to Central Iowa Water, and that contract would last for 20 years. Seems like a long time, but it's an important thing for the employees of those entities to understand there's some stability as well as some longevity. And obviously they have to meet contractual responsibilities, or there can be an avenue for changing that agreement. So that was an important thing to their laborers, unions, and to them as a whole in protecting their communities, and certainly have no reason to believe that that won't be a good thing for Central Iowa that can be reviewed after 20 years. A couple of the other items is charges and fees for usage above individual capacity. So in this agreement of determining the valuation of an entity in this region, I'll give you Urbandale as an example. We currently have 15.3 million gallons of capacity that we own in the current system. With the reevaluation of this regional entity, they take the value of that, and through book value and depreciation, we end up with 13.1 or 2 million gallons worth of capacity ownership in the region. Rather than just capacity, we have ownership in the region. And that will then be equated to what we're able to use throughout the year without any exceedance of penalties. We currently use about 10 million gallons per day, so we're about 30-some% in excess of what our leverage capacity will be. Now, all of this is not free. We have to buy, we'll provide our, I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit, so let me move on through that. There will be penalties assessed that would affirm the need to project for each individual community to project future demand for each entity and pay their fair share. So there needs to be some planning that says if Urbandale is going to grow, and we are projecting that in the next 5 years we'll need an additional demand because of a large consumer or simply growth, then we need to plan for that, and the region needs to plan for it. And if you fail to do that, there's a penalty, provide for a penalty that says if you fail to do that, you're going to pay for the debt service of those people who own excess of the capacity. So it gives opportunity, it gives a reason to plan appropriately, a penalty, but also reimburses those who have planned appropriately to reimburse them for the excess. Water loss calculations, obviously Des Moines has infrastructure that is entwined and linked together with the transmission mains that will serve the entry points to those members. And so there has to be a calculation for water loss that's given back to Des Moines, because everybody has water loss. Nobody has zero. And if the region is owning those transmission lines, we're working through a calculation to give a strategy to giving Des Moines credit for that water loss through transmission line. Asset transfer, as I mentioned, those assets will be transferred. We have evaluated the timing. The agreement will state that asset transfer will occur at the timing of the signing. However, as we all know, that is not a simple thing. There will be some hoops to jump through for that to accomplish. So it's laid out, but also realize it may take some time for that to be fully transferred and accomplished. So what's the financial model look like? Water production facilities, the CIWW will have total ownership of source, treatment, and transmission. So booster stations that are currently serving more than one or two entities would become property of Central Iowa Water and owned and operated by Central Iowa Water. And that's true for any source or treatment or transmission pump stations, ASR wells. There will be ASR wells, other infrastructure within a member's distribution system will continue to be owned by that member. But there are other assets that are really a joint asset that will become part of Central Iowa Water. Asset owners will be compensated for those excess capacity. So let's go back to Des Moines as an example. For instance, Des Moines owns 40% of the total capacity, or uses 40%. So if you add West Des Moines capacity and Des Moines capacity, their average day is around 40 million. So they will have to own and maintain and pay for 40% of the capacity. The other 60%, or let's say Des Moines has 50% of that additional capacity, that will be bought and divvied up by the other members that are buying into the infrastructure. So there's a cost. So that cost to Urbandale to buy in will be approximately $5 million plus the cost that we have contributed for purchase capacity. So, but our net, we've already paid for those other purchase capacity, but our net buy-in will be $5 million approximately. Everybody has a different number because their buy-in to the infrastructure has been at less. For instance, Johnston has not bought anything in the infrastructure. They do not own any purchase capacity, so their buy-in will be higher. Obviously, West Des Moines is contributing assets, so their buy-in will be much lower. Des Moines will receive a check, West Des Moines will receive a check, others will buy into that. So we level the playing field of ownership as we move into this asset transfer. And obviously those existing debts on, which are minor actually, but there are some existing debts that will be transferred to Central Iowa Water. So the cost coverage of rates, cost allocated to production, drinking water will be paid for by Central Iowa Water and distributed through rates. Producers will be paid based on actual cost plus 2%. And you may say, why 2%? Because of the entanglement of existing infrastructure and the difficulty of separating everything out, and it just gives a little bit of leeway for those producing entities. We've tightened it and scrutinized it as best we can, but there's obviously things that cannot be foreseen, and so there's a little bit of leeway for that. Capital costs for source, treatment, and transmission, replacement, upgrade, operation, and maintenance will be charged through wholesale rates. So what now? We are trying to finalize those documents. There are a couple of, more than two, but two major hurdles that we feel are important, the Water Utility Board are important to Urbandale and to many surrounding members. we have hired PFM, financial advisors, to verify book value assets. So it's not one entity producing and saying, hey, here's the value of my assets, here's the book value, put that on the books as my contribution. They will verify Des Moines assets, our assets, West Des Moines assets, anybody that's contributing, they will verify that book value. So there's some confidence in the structure put forth that all of these values are correct on the same playing field. For instance, I'll just tell you, one of the things we've worked through is Des Moines Water Works has a different depreciation period for assets versus what West Des Moines and Urbandale has. And so we had to work through bringing those to some centralized level and same comparison. Well, Grimes may have something different, Altoona may have something different. If they choose to join, all of those things will be scrutinized, and I think it's only fair that we have a third party doing that. They will also be managing the startup of this financial model. Ongoing discussions that I feel are very important to the Urbandale Water Utility, and I think, and I know the board feels the same, is one of the largest hurdles are these two issues: rural water service territory transfer issues. As you know, Urbandale is growing, and the likelihood of expansion is in the future. We know that we will need to annex into those areas, and as we've seen in current issues, Johnston is currently in litigation with Xenia about some of those area issues. And what we have proposed, Urbandale and West Des Moines has proposed a document that would set out the parameters for territory transfers. So as we annex into an area, we have provided for two options to those rural water systems, that we would either buy out the infrastructure at their cost of installment. There's a federal law established in 1926 that protects them and the federal loan that backs them to be able to be repaid. And only fair and reasonable that should be in place. However, Urbandale or rural waters were established for the purpose of providing water for entities or individuals in rural areas that could not have safe water. Well, in some cases, as urban sprawl has begun to grow, the rural waters have begun to take on the stance that we're going to provide service for them, and has become a difficult hurdle for growing communities. And we feel that and they have exemplified in Ames, Xenia has an Ames and Johnston and other areas that are starting to stand their ground and not want to give up those areas. So we prepared a document that says, hey, here's the way, either we'll pay for your assets so that you reimburse the loan, or number two, we'll pay for 20 years of revenue from any customer that we take over. So that, again, your loan is based on your ability to repay those loans through revenue. We're accomplishing that 1926 law. Now, we have provided that and met with Warren Rural Water. They're very receptive to it and don't have a problem with it. Xenia has been less than receptive. So we, as Urbandale and West Des Moines, believe it's a fair, we don't really want to join an entity in which the members are suing each other, quite honestly. And I think it's important to Urbandale and to the city council and mayor that going forward that we have an instrument in place that we can advance and fairly compensate the rural waters for that. Because it is a struggle to have customers of Urbandale, citizens of Urbandale, paying two different rates. Xenia has a much higher rate than Urbandale Water Utility. And you will hear that argument if we're not allowed to move in this fashion. As well as it has an issue with, currently Water Utility tries to work hand in hand with the city council and development and growth and meeting those demands. In the future, I'm not saying that can't accomplish, but it's much more difficult because there is no tie from Xenia to Urbandale. And it's a venue that we would prefer not to have happen. If there's any way we can accomplish that, we're wanting to do that. And we're saying, we're wanting to presenting the foot forward that says, hey, if you want to become members, let's all get along. Let's put forth a format that works for everybody. And that's an important issue. So Des Moines has a little bit less of incentive to go along with that. They're saying, well, we're not forcing anybody to this. And I'm saying we're not forcing anybody either. You either want to join or you don't. And so those purchase agreement contracts are in place with Des Moines Water Works. Central Iowa will have to continue to honor, but there's in place a way to do those transfer. So let's assume, so here's the next issue, big issue. Let's assume Xenia does not, or One Water, or whoever, Altoona, decides not to participate. So what do we do with the wholesale customers? Those customers, we are a wholesale customer to Des Moines right now. What do we do with them? Should they become a customer of Central Iowa Water? It is my opinion and West Des Moines' opinion that they should be. All of the water is owned by Central Iowa Water, and it should be sold by Central Iowa Water. And if there's any net gain to be established from a wholesale customer, that net gain should come back to the region and not to Des Moines Water Works as a wholesale customer provider. And so Des Moines obviously is pushing back on that. They're making arguments that the contract doesn't allow for transfer. We don't believe that to be the case. They obviously have net gain from this to maintain that position. Those are the two big issues that we still have to accomplish and get over. There's, as I mentioned, there's some smaller ones, weighted voting, ASR guidelines, operational contracts, but all of those we're working through. We will get through them. Those other two are big hurdles. We're having ongoing legal review from bond counsel for Allers and Dorsey and Whitney and respective counsel. We have taken all comments from adjoining communities or potential member communities and consolidated them in the next draft, trying to meet everybody's, or at least answering the questions that they pose. So in wrapping this up, where we headed in the future, it is our best hope that here in the first quarter, and we hope in the first part of the quarter, we will have a final draft that we can present to potential members that will then receive individual membership review and comment, and hopefully an agreement can be executed by the second or third quarter of 2023. And so with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have and any comments that John has or any.
Dale, I just have to say, you distilled 5+ years of discussion in about 30 minutes. So you did.
Yeah, that's very true. It's been a long road, but there's a lot to it.
Yep. John, do you have anything further you want to add?
Well, I just have to echo what Dale's referring to, and the major concerns for me really are these wholesale customers, meaning customers that are technically, Des Moines says there are customers, and then of course the ongoing battle with Xenia probably causes me a lot more problem from the standpoint of how it impacts the city of Urbandale. Number one, because Dale mentioned you don't want these two bills going out. And there's more involved than that. We have a certain amount of control on anybody that doesn't pay. And that bill that goes out monthly has a number of items that relate back to the city, not necessary to the Urbandale water utility. And how do those get then sent out and worked into the system? Is that something Xenia is going to be ready to do at a fee or whatever? And is that something that we really would want them to do? So this fight with this annexation going forward, which we hope is there, does cause us significant problems. It also affects us on how much water do we really need. And if you think about it, if Xenia is going to take over then our likelihood of needing hardly any more water than what we're getting right now is really limited. Probably won't be there. Dale mentioned the 10 million gallons thing, daily use. That's the max day use. And you have to plan for that max day use. So our normal run would probably be more like in 5, 6, 7 million. It's only during the really hot summer months where everybody's running irrigation that we ratchet up to that 10 million number. But if we're only going to be supplying water to a part of any additional citizens coming into Urbandale, then we don't need any more than we got. And so, what Des Moines wanted to do on this expansion of Saylorville, which we really didn't talk about, and help me, Dale, on the numbers. I think that total cost is what, 150 million?
Right at 160, that's correct.
160. So if they feel that we ought to pony up again for another million and a half gallons, which would then take us to, say, 14 and a half. And my theory on that is that unless we can get through this Zania issue, there's no way I'm going to want the citizens of Urbandale to step up and pay that, because that's the end product. And that's a fairly good sized number. And it works kind of funny is that there's a 9% that gets allocated to everybody on whatever this cost is. And that's based on our 10%, I say 10% of what those costs are. The balance, the 91% then gets allocated to those that are requiring the need for additional water. Well, there's no need for us to acquire more, I don't feel. Just to have an excess. And I'm not going to want to be in a position where I'm saying, Urbandale, you need to pay these additional rates for something you're not even going to use. Now, that's my theory. And I suppose people could shut me down on that. But so that's a major issue to me, is being able to do that. There's certain parts of this potential annexation area which really is probably ours. They don't serve, but it's a very small part.
Yeah, I'm not advocating that Xenia, there aren't some issues if we annex this west, that there aren't some areas that Xenia may say, you can buy us out and we'll buy them out because they may not be able to serve those areas. There are some, but I think they're going to become more limited all the time.
All right. Thanks, guys. Any questions from the council on this? Again, that's a lot to take in, guys. I've been on this issue for as long as we've been discussing it. When we started with bilateral talks with Des Moines, even before the regional discussion went in, and there's so many wrinkles to water and how that's calculated. So I appreciate Dale and John's wisdom on this. I know they are leading us well to find the best path forward for our residents. So guys, thank you on that. Anything further for the good of the order? All right. Well, we're past our 1 o'clock deadline. I want to respect everybody's time. But again, thank you, everyone, for contributing today. And I will call the meeting adjourned. And have a wonderful holiday.